Hello and welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. Today we will be focusing on a critical moment for Pakistan's economy. On March 3rd, 2025, that is yesterday, a 9-member delegation led by Nathan Porter arrived in Islamabad. And this is for the biannual review of course, IMF deal with Pakistan. This review is key to releasing the next 1 billion tranche. And of course, when we talk about this deal, it will be released only if we meet important targets like reforming state-owned enterprises and advancing climate financing, including other, of course, making reforms. Securing this IMF tranche is not only for immediate relief, but it is important for Pakistan's future economic growth as well. In today's program, we will be talking about this important visit, and of course, we know this is going to be lasting till 15th of March, what it means for Pakistan, and with changing global dynamics, how important it is for Pakistan to come out of IMF. Of course, we will be talking about this significant $7 billion bailout deal. But what are the challenges when we talk about implementation of the reforms that are required by IMF? To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Dr. Usman Chauhan, who is advisor on economy to CAS. Welcome to the program. We're also joined online by Dr. Aima Mehdi, who is economist. Welcome to the program. And we are joined by senior economist Dr. Hassan Zafar. Welcome to the program. Dr. Usman, let me start with you. First of all, how do you assess this strategic visit of IMF delegation regarding 7 billion extended fund facility that spans over 37 months? And how critical, in your opinion, is this for stabilizing our economy?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your show. The most important thing is that it's a routine thing, that the IMF would come biannually to visit and check out how we're doing with our targets and meeting them in a timely manner. So it is very important to hit at least the majority of the targets, and wherever there are slippages, you have a discussion about it and give a timeline for how you're going to fix that. There are targets about debt to GDP, your fiscal deficit, your current account deficit, and generally things are looking very good. So the government feels quite confident, and that's good. But there are some areas where some negotiation will have to happen. For example, about how to raise revenues further or expand the tax base or to target particular sectors for taxation. So a bit more discussion on the revenue side will happen. But in general, things are quite good because Pakistan did take difficult measures at a very difficult time too. As you recall, 2024, the early part was a very tough part for the global economy, and yet such austerity measures were taken. So the credit is, deserved, and so that'll be the general gist of this conversation during this review, I believe.
Right. Let me take the same question to Dr. Aima. Dr. Aima, in your opinion, what specific quantitative measures are required at this point in time by Pakistan? Of course, and when we talk about structural benchmarks, in your opinion, that are crucial to implementation of or to unlocking this $1 billion tranche at this point in time?
Such a comprehensive question. I don't think there is going to be any issue for the country to get the next tranche from IMF because this is a routine visit, and also the government has done quite a lot to increase the tax collection in terms of the salaried class. So we are far away in the total revenue collection, but not too far. I would say we're around 5% far from the revenue collection target that we had to meet. In terms of the numbers, and the issue is that we have only taxed our revenue class, and we've done some sort of policy making around filers and non-filers. Right now, IMF's main agenda is to take into consideration the real estate taxation, which is the most tax evaded sector of the country. So they are talking, like, for the 2 weeks visit, the first week is about the technical grounds of what's happening in the country, and the next 1 week is about the analytical policy making. So in the first 1 week, they're discussing about the real estate taxation, which the government has promised to make an authority which is called VERA, Real Estate Regulatory Authority, and whoever will evade tax will be fined or even put in the jail for 3 years, which I think is going to do some favor. The other thing is also about the letting agencies, the buying and selling apart from the real estate, and also the agriculture taxation sector. So these are the kind of things that IMF really wants to see, because IMF has seen how we have heavily taxed our salary class and how we've gone into revenue collection, etc. But revenue collection still remains a big concern for IMF. So this is what the finance minister, etc., are talking. And IMF is also going to have talks on provincial levels with different budgetary associations, etc., to see how we can increase our tax base and how we can tax the sectors that have been evaded for a long, long time. So we're going to see tax in the real estate sector. We're going to see taxes in the agriculture production sector, which I think is good for the country in the long term. It might seem like a hard pill for now, but in the long run, it's a good thing because everyone will be equally taxed, or at least bought into the tax net. The other thing I do see for the country right now is that there are issues around inflation going up a bit again, and IMF also wants to see business activity and economic growth. So our economic growth has persistently been really low, around 0.5.
Right, we'll come back to that point as well. But Dr. Hassan, I want to address the point of technical slippages that, of course, Dr. Aima also alluded to. In your opinion, given the reports of these technical slippages, such as agricultural taxation, how do you think these are going to be impacting this tranche compared to the previous IMF deals?
Thank you very much, Maryam. I think Dr. Chauhan and Dr. Aima have rightly pointed out that this is just a routine visit, and there doesn't appear to be any problem in releasing this $1 billion. As for the technical trenches that you're talking about, I think taxation is important, but probably is not the priority in the sense that this money that was released by the IMF, the idea was to focus on fiscal policies, which also includes taxation, structural reforms, and climate financing initiatives. So structural reforms we have seen have not been quite significant so far, but on the other hand, inflation has definitely cooled down. If we compare from the February of 24 to now. Last year it was 24%. Now it is around 1%, and the finance minister says it might go up to 2 to 3% in March. So these are the kind of projections that we have so far. But yes, the structural reforms remain a challenge, and there are other challenges too, because our GDP growth rate is not going up, and the expert opinion is when we push the GDP growth rate up, the inflation is going to go up, and that is the kind of balance that we need to achieve. Let's see how the government comes up with a plan to balance this thing. That if we want to increase the GDP growth rate, otherwise we have a growing population with the kind of unemployment that we have, we will definitely need to increase the GDP growth rate. So that remains to be seen, and I think that is the chief challenge at the moment for the government, that it should be able to provide employment, and it should be able to curtail the inflation rate or keep it at the minimum, at least where it is at the moment.
Of course, Dr. Hassan is saying that macroeconomic indicators are showing a steady rupee and inflation rate at 1.4%, a current account surplus of over $600 million, remittances exceeding $3 billion per month, and resilient exports. But how sustainable is this in the long term, or rather in the short term as well?
This is a very good question. Dr. Hassan Zafar and I have been having very lively and spirited conversations recently. I fully agree with his assessment that things are looking good. As you have correctly pointed to, the remittances are strong and things look very good, but Pakistan is a country that is very much at the mercy of the tides of international volatility. The international volatility can certainly increase in the second half of this year, whether because there might be, God forbid, a conflict erupting or brewing or amplifying in the Middle East, whether it is because there is so much damage to the US economy from the measures being taken by Trump, such as tariffs, whether it is because, God forbid, the US decides to back out or gut further agencies that have an international impact, including the IMF possibly. And so there's so many moving parts to the world economy right now that we just can't see that far ahead. So we are always at the mercy of that, and if that sort of volatility happens and if that sort of disruption occurs, then Pakistan will be disproportionately affected, and we have evidence of that from how things panned out in 2022 and 23, where inflation shot up, and it was countries like Sri Lanka, Kenya, Pakistan, because we import a lot of our energy, because our exports are not large compared to GDP, because we have to rely on assistance from international institutions. These factors all make it difficult for Pakistan to be able to weather that storm. So my advice to the government would be to buffer those reserves and hunker down for the rainy days that might come ahead, which is very likely in this difficult and turbulent decade.
And Dr. Aima, how do you weigh this temporary stability that is provided by IMF against the high cost of domestic growth at this point in time?
I think I think as a country, Pakistan has really become an expert in soothing down things in real turbulent times. But the downside is that we lack the hindsight of making policies that are long term. As an economist, or as I mean, as any expert, you would see just relying on remittances. Remittances in Ramadan are high in any case. Any economy that relies on remittances just is a very meek sign of how the economy is growing, because people are generally relying on their relatives, etc., for or funds come from abroad to kind of sustain in the whole setup. The thing what Dr. Smart Jahan rightly said is that we are highly dependent on what happens in the foreign economy. I do see inflation in the ballpark figure of 5%, because US is going to be facing a lot of inflationary pressures due to tariffs, etc. China is doing a good job keeping things in Asia smooth, and its relationship with Pakistan is also quite good. So that's something that we're going to benefit from. However, whatever we are taking from the IMF is going towards stabilization and just to secure the bankruptcy which we were at the brim of. However, what is being invested in terms of trade sector, in terms of industries, in terms of climate finance is still a big question. And I do fear that even without GDP growth, which Dr. Hassan has mentioned, we might have an upward spike in inflation, because most of our the circular debt in terms of energy sector has been paid through by the tranches from IMF. So in the short term, we are fine with electricity, the debt we have in the electricity sector, we are fine. But in the long term, where do we see ourselves? Is it sustainable or not? And I think we have easy solutions for this if we go ahead with what's happening in Gwadar. We build our ports, CPEC, etc. Privatization of a few really sick industries, privatization would really help. And I think in the short term, it's fine just to stabilize our country from bankruptcy. But in the long term, I don't see any effort being put in over there. I would really like to see exports from, for example, agricultural sector. There's a huge demand in UAE and all the Gulf region. I would like to see like textile exports going up. I would like to see some sort of IT going up. And these are things that will really help us grow in terms of GDP, also become an independent nation without debt. So yeah, that's from me.
Right, right. And Dr. Hassan, what's your take on this with Trump's second presidency changing the global geopolitics as well as economic order? How do you think this is going to be impacting Pakistan's long-term stability in terms of the tariffs that, of course, Dr. Swan earlier alluded to? And how does these external geopolitical changes are going to be impacting the restructuring that Pakistan is looking forward to?
Yes, Dr. Chauhan has very rightly pointed out, and so has Dr. Ahmad, that this IMF program and the money that is coming through this program may be helpful in kind of short-term firefighting, but long-term policies and sustainable growth still remains a major challenge. Dr. Am also talked about the agricultural growth. We heard that Pakistan will need to import wheat this year worth $1 billion, which means that we are lagging behind in agricultural sector, industrial sector. We know is not performing very well. So growth, industrial and agricultural both remain a major challenge. Now, putting all these challenges include energy challenge as well, because we are importing oil and producing energy, and geopolitical situation, if it changes, if things don't cool down in the Middle East, as we heard, Israel has in a way broken the ceasefire already, and if things change in Europe and the war does not come to a conclusion there, the energy prices remain in a balance. We don't know if they are going to go up very soon and where they stop if they go up. So energy remains a challenge because energy prices have been lower during the previous year. It's been anywhere between $70 and $80 a barrel, and that has helped Pakistan economy because it decreased the pressure on the import bill. So that has helped keeping the inflation down. So multiple factors, austerity measures. Uh, uh, I think the government has not been able to pay as much attention to the reduction of the government size as the IMF had demanded, and it remains to be seen whether they are still going to push the government on that front, that they should reduce the government size. There's no talk about it. But geopolitically speaking, the release of $397 billion from the United States for the Pakistani F-16 fleet, apparently for the monitoring upgrade, that is a significant thing, because on one hand they have stopped all the foreign aid. U.S. Aid Department has been closed down, and this special fund has been released for Pakistan. Shows that there is something on the horizon which we perhaps cannot see very clearly at the moment. And but we will have to see. We can just speculate that because your question is about geopolitics. USA has demanded Bagram air base from Afghanistan. They want to take the control back of it. So what does that mean? That Pakistan has a geopolitical situation to deal with on its western border again. So, but these are just speculations. We are not in a very good position to make a final comment on it.
And we just have to wait and watch for that. But Dr. Usman, coming back to this point about external factors, of course, impacting Pakistan's economy, and keeping in mind the history, and we have discussed a lot of our discussions about this. What's your take on the context in the context of these, of course, dynamics that are changing every day? Do you think they are going to be more complicating the situation in Pakistan's economy? And also, I asked you last time as well, what are the lessons we can learn from past IMF deals that we can finally implement moving forward?
Yes, thank you for this two-part question. The two eminent speakers have laid out some very important factors. I agree with what they're saying, and I would just like to add that there is an important element of day-to-day volatility, and we shouldn't fall prey entirely to such immediate turbulence, but rather we should separate the signal from the noise in the economy. And what that means is that we continue on the path towards the reform that is required and be as bold as possible, because we faced an economic situation as dire as ever in our history, and that gives us the political mileage and the sort of political space to decide to do things that were probably not possible before in terms of sacred cows. That is where your second question is addressed, I believe, where with the IMF, the most important lesson for us is that we need to fulfill a program through and through, not just to the IMF satisfaction, but to our people's satisfaction, in the sense of having an entirely different economic system that sheds the weight of a colonial, post-colonial baggage, and instead one that produces public value for the people. The sorts of reforms that are being done may seem unpleasant, but if they're taken to their fullest extent, you could have a totally different society and a totally different economy, particularly if you do things on reforming the energy sector, particularly if you mechanize your agriculture, particularly if you focus on the ability for people to start their own businesses, particularly if you are able to move energy across the country in a more efficient manner, having different modes of transport to do that. If the IMF program is the impetus for doing all those things, then Pakistan has all the endowments and resources to be entirely self-sufficient and in fact a net exporter, a surplus exporter to the world for many, many things.
Right, right. And Dr. Aima, when we look at, of course, climate financing, in your opinion, how different is this going to be when we look at 2013 or 2019? When we look at this IMF deal, and how do you compare it to the previous deals like in 2013 and 2019, and how do you think that the demands of IMF with focus on Pakistan contributing at least 1% of its GDP to green financing is going to be implemented?
Okay, so this is a very timely question, keeping in mind the current scenario. I think the focus on green financing and on green corporate finance is going to be higher than ever right now because as a country, we've seen how much we have suffered due to pollution and carbon footprint from other countries, not just our own. Right now, if I talk about the agriculture sector, why has our agriculture output gone so low? Year on year, it was going down, but in the last 5 to 7 years, it has drastically decreased. And one of the reason is deforestation and lack or untimeliness of the rain, and that is because that has caused our water table to really go below the mark. And our cotton exports and rice exports do require a lot of water, and which is why our agriculture exports and indeed the food security of the Pakistani population, which is the fifth largest in the world, has fallen a prey to the whole thing. So right now we're going to get a bigger fund that will be channelized toward green financing or climate finance, and I think it is the need of the day. It's dire need of the day to do a lot of investments in the sector and to reinforce different sort of like drip harvesting and all sorts of new techniques of seed plantation etc to increase the net harvest and also then be able to export it. And I think right now Pakistan is in a geographical position where it has given great evidence of being a sufferer of everything that has happened in terms of carbon footprints of the other countries and pollution from other countries. So it is going to attract a lot of finance in that sector. And I think in the whole scenario, the government has a good chance of investing in green finance and in cars that are either EVs. We now have a surplus of elect, so that's good. We can have that. We can have good public transport. Public transport is indeed going to be beneficial for employment sector, like transporting people from one side to the other. It is also going to decrease the saturated population in urban areas because people will have the ease of transportation, so there'll be good public transport. So I think this is a good step, but I also don't want to see it all being concentrated towards Lahore or Punjab. It has to be dispersed around the provinces so that every province can have a benefit of this. And I think as a country, we should be able to get more funding from the IMF in terms of green and climate finance. So this is going to be much better than 2019.
And at the same time, Pakistan faces a lot of challenges when it comes to energy sector. So, Dr. Aima, in your opinion, do you think this is going to be impacting IMF's evaluation of Pakistan?
Well, right now for the elect, Pakistan has proven that they've been able to get rid of some of the circular debt in energy, and in the short term, as I mentioned, it doesn't seem to be an issue. The supply doesn't seem to be an issue, but IMF is going to see how we write our future contracts. Our energy is still being produced by coal, and our IPPs have been very expensive. How much contract is left? And in terms of energy, well, I could speak if for ages on this, but in terms of energy, I think we need more sophisticated systems such as net metering, green meters. We need sophisticated batteries where we can store electricity. We have so much of daylight. We need to have like a massive distribution of solar panels, but that also affects negatively on our standing charge, which has been the biggest killer of why solar panels haven't benefited the system. And then people who can't afford the solar panels have had to pay the standing charge. So we need a net metering system where the excess energy goes back into the system. So I think there is some lack in the sophistication of the energy system networks and in the energy price controls because it's such a monopoly. We need to regulate the sector, and which is why IMF is actually going to hold talks with NEPRA. There are special days that are just designated towards NEPRA because energy, we have been dragged into all this debt hole because of the energy sector. If you see, one of the major constituent of this debt circle, the vicious cycle, has been energy. So NEPRA and IMF are going to hold very important talks where we're going to discuss how we can have a net metering system, how we can deal with the standing charge and solar panels at the same time. And I think this is very challenging. The way government has posed it for now, that we've pay this circular debt, but the circular debt has been paid by the tranches from the IMF. So it's like a two-edged sword. We don't know which way we're going, but we have to be very vigilant in this sector.
Right, right. And Dr. Hassan, of course, the energy sector remains an important aspect to be discussed in these discussions with IMF delegation. But at the same time, state-owned enterprises remain an important factor. And with IMF stressing the need for structural reforms time and again, what's your take on that? And what steps can be taken to improve their efficiency at this point in time so that they are not a burden on our economy?
I don't know how to bring this back to life because I think there's short-term measures if we need to take before we are able to sell them off. Reduce the government intervention in these enterprises. Let them be more of a public-private partnership kind of thing, because these were the measures that were suggested by the experts, that if before we decide to sell these small and medium enterprises, government-owned enterprises, because we need to make them functional, a little bit profitable, at least pull them out of that the kind of the deep losses they are in. So for that matter, what we need to do is to encourage the private sector gradually to come and take over and reduce the intervention of our bureaucracy into those, at least stop making top appointments from the bureaucracy in these businesses, which have been a very attractive postings for the government officers so far, because they are very lucrative. So for that matter, I think there are there are bodies available. For example, if we Ministry of Trade and Commerce can involve the business groups in our major business centers, for example, Sialkot, Islamabad, Karachi, encourage business people to come and invest in these areas and form some boards to run these enterprises and withdraw the government footprint from these businesses. So, but this cannot be achieved overnight, but it is doable if they are willing to do that. But the challenge does remain that how to keep holding them and keep them out of any kind of serious losses, because if they remain in loss, who is going to buy them? We saw what happened with the PIA last year. It was a ridiculously low bid that was offered. But so if that remains the situation, but thankfully we heard that the current PIA administration was able to make some drastic changes, restore foreign routes. So if that is the kind of thing, if the business is going in profit, it is easy to sell it out. Otherwise, who is going to buy these dead elephants? So that remains a challenge. It's a two-edged sword. You cannot keep them in a total loss or a perpetual state of loss and keep feeding them from the public money. And if they are in profit, you will have to stop the temptation of holding them on forever. So the minute they start going in profit, that's the time to sell them off.
A burden on
Yes,
Pakistan's
please.
economy. Dr. Usman, what's your take on this when we talk about state-owned enterprises? What, in your opinion, can you tell us two, three steps that we can improve the efficacy of these enterprises so that they are not a burden on the economy, and it is easier if we have to sell them out?
Yes, absolutely. So the state-owned enterprise system is important for Pakistan, but you can neither go for sweeping measures one way or the other. You cannot just simply nationalize everything. That was a very bad system that we had tried before. You should also think about not just privatizing, sweeping everything, because it's more about the public value created by these organizations. For example, there are instances where some public assets were privatized, and those who bought them in the past converted them into housing societies and asset stripped the organization because the mindset of the management wasn't right. Similarly, when you've nationalized, you've just filled in institutions with political appointees all the way across the hierarchy, and it becomes a white elephant. So neither of these sweeping approaches works well. Instead, you can do a targeted thing, noting a few factors. The first is that some state-owned enterprises will always run losses, but they have an important public character. For example, the national highway authorities will always run losses, but it facilitates so much economic activity that it can hemorrhage while you could, but you do need a good road network and create economic activity by people moving around. At the same time, there are organizations that do generate a profit, and you probably do want to have at least some input into how they regulate certain things. For example, OGDC is profitable, but you probably do want to have a voice in there about how things are regulated and what prices are set and how your oil and gas works in the country. In the middle are many bulky and outdated, overrepresented organizations that probably do need to be privatized, and that's, I think, where our focus is. For them, you do have to get a good price, you do have to do something that reflects the book value of the assets, and then you also have to depoliticize them, so whatever management comes in is efficient and cares about the character of the organization rather than, as Dr. Hassan correctly pointed out, their own personal lucrative interests within that enterprise.
Right, right. And now, Dr. Usman, let's talk about the need for technological reforms with IMF pushing for stronger budget execution and digitalization of the public financial management system. What technological reforms should be given a priority to ensure fiscal transparency?
It's more of a political question, and I think the IMF's pressure gives us the room to be able to enact it. But basically, you're trying to put technology in ways that add transparency and accountability. So it's basically technological accounting, which is very, very good. There are many vested interests which want to control more than they should the power of the purse and how things are dispersed. Further down the hierarchy you go, the nastier it becomes. And so the more important thing is that if you have these controls that are then set through, that you can see how things are being spent, it cuts the margins of a rent extraction that these political interests would have. So in the long run, if you do have such technologies, these positions automatically become less lucrative, which is a good thing because it means that targeted spending can be accounted for, and then you would know how things are being spent. You would then, in a democracy, be able to articulate that it should be spent this way or that. And so things do improve in countries which have, and my PhD was on this area as well, on budget execution through technology. So it is very important to have these, and I'm a strong advocate of having the technological basis for accounting in society.
Right, right. And Dr. Aima, you earlier mentioned about provinces. What challenges do you foresee in aligning fiscal targets across all four provinces, and how can this coordination improve overall economic planning?
Um, well, the fiscal, the fiscal revenue and the fiscal expenditures in the four provinces differ quite a lot, and we've seen that over The history it's happened since partition, and that's one issue. Like we see that in Balochistan, we don't have enough expenditure. It's a province that's laying behind in a lot of areas, education, infrastructure, jobs, etc. Whereas Punjab has always had the leverage of enjoying a lot of the fruits. So this is one issue, and it has caused a lot of political instability, civil instability in the country. And I think this challenge will keep on going on, where Punjab and Sindh will have the benefit of more of the agricultural or exports or more jobs financial sector. KPK and Balochistan are an issue. And for Balochistan, I am sure IMF is undergoing talks around Recodic as well. So that is one thing that we're looking around. And this is going to be a challenge for the government. Well, if you see any country, it is not a uniform task or uniform challenge to align and keep all the provinces together. Different countries, you'll say regionally economies, provincial economies do differ, which is fine for Pakistan as well. We are on the same page as any first world advanced country. However, we need to have a uniform system in terms of education, in terms of basic life quality, which is hospitals, etc. And I think government should work towards that, leaving apart the more advanced stages of like jobs and industries, etc. So that's one challenge that the government has to see, how to bring in a uniform level of standard of life, quality of life, education, health, in all the four sectors. Then it can act on the specialized sectors, where it be agriculture, be it industries, etc. Also, what was your second question? Sorry.
Yeah, and how does this coordination improve the overall economic planning when we talk about provinces and aligning?
I think Yeah, okay. So in terms of aligning all the provinces, I think it will be a good system. It will be like equal dispersion of revenues, and I think it will bring in more prosperity because some provinces are better than the other in terms of, let's say, natural resources. There's an influx of investment in Balochistan for agriculture. We want to see how that happens. I think it's like looking into things that haven't been explored yet, looking into sectors that haven't been explored yet, and I think there is a huge possibility that we'll be able to gain net revenues in these sectors. Coming to the question that you asked, Dr. Usman Chahan, I think when we put our budget and everything to public, it obviously entails a lot of transparency, and it is a very beneficial step towards people and the public asking towards where things are going, and the transparency to be able to see whatever you are paying in terms of taxes is coming back to you. So I think I am a strong proponent of this should go ahead, and we should have a transparency in this sector. Thank you.
Right. Finally, Dr. Hassan, as Pakistan is negotiating with IMF for this 1 billion tranche, in your opinion, what long-term strategies are required by Pakistan for sustainability and to address our current economic challenges and to also to attract foreign direct investment?
Yes, can I combine this question with the previous one? Because I was thinking about that. Uh, Please note one thing. Last NFC award was 2009, 10. Last census that was conducted in 2023, the first digital census that it was called, it was kind of controversial in its outcome because of the political situation at that time. These two things are important because if we want to have a new NFC award and we want to think of the distribution of finances and resources across the provinces and across the population, so for that reason, we need to have some accurate, updated data. We don't know how our demographics are, how many children are out of school, how many people are unemployed, the population growth rate, etc. According to the 2023 census, the population, urban population is about 38%. Now it is maybe 40%. Remember where it was 20 years ago, remember where it was 10 years ago, and we don't know where it is going to be in 10 years from now. So when we don't have this kind of data with us, we cannot have a sustained policy about anything. How do we make policies when we don't have any statistical data about our population and about the resources and how to distribute them? So this needs to be done. If 2023 census was not so accurate, I think we should go for it again, and it should be depoliticized. This thing should be depoliticized. We know in some parts of this country, census is a hugely political thing because that is how the resources are going to be distributed. So
Right.
unless we are able to take this crucial
Right, right. Of course, Dr. Hassan, we have to address the root causes. Unfortunately, we are pressed for time at this, but thank you very much, Dr. Hassan Zafar, for joining us in today's discussion. Thank you very much, Dr. Aima Mehdi, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Dr. Usman Chauhan, for joining us in today's program. That's all from today's discussion. Thanks for joining.